Hello, today we would like to talk about hand tool safety. Hand tools are used by all Briggs engineers on a daily basis. Almost every job completed by an engineer will require the use of a hand tool in some way. It is therefore very important that we use these tools correctly to prevent incidents, injuries, or indeed damage to the tools themselves or the equipment being worked on. Before we even think of using our hand tools, there are important checks that must be made and steps which must be followed. First things first, you must put on your personal protective equipment. This will include as a minimum overalls, safety boots, safety glasses and nitrile gloves. If you wear rings, watches, bracelets or any other jewellery, you must remove these items and store them in a safe location. Before using your tools, you must ensure they are clean and safe to use. Always perform a visual check of your tools, and if they are made up of different parts, ensure the parts are secured together as they should be. Inspect the surface material of your tools for signs of cracks, fractures or unsafe wear. When performing your visual checks, ensure your tools are not bent in any way, and if your tools are fitted with handles, ensure they are secure. Finally, if your tools have any specific heads or ends, ensure they are in good condition and free from damage. We will now look at some of the general principles of hand tool safety. To begin with, always ensure the tool you are using is the correct size and correct type for the task in hand. Generally speaking, you should pull hand tools towards your body rather than pushing them away from your body. This will give more stability if the bolt or fitting suddenly gives, and will reduce the likelihood of striking your hand off another object. If you find the bolt or fitting to be too tight, do not strain yourself. Change your tool to a larger one with more leverage. Do not, however, be tempted to extend your tooling in any way. This could result in injuries from the tool breaking or the extension slipping off. Similarly, do not be tempted to strike the tool with a hammer. Instead, use a larger, more sufficient tool with increased leverage. When transporting tools, do not place them in your pocket, especially if they have sharp ends or are contaminated with oil. Instead, use a small toolbox or tool tray to transport them safely. If you are going to be working with your hand tools close to electrical components, always ensure the electrical supply is isolated before beginning. We will now take a look at the various types of hand tools. To begin with, we will look at sockets and socketry. As a hand tool, sockets are generally used in conjunction with ratchets or breaker bars. Before use, you must always check that the socket is correctly and securely attached. When using a breaker bar, ensure the angle of the knuckle is less than 90 degrees to prevent slippage. For the same reason, do not use unnecessary extensions between the socket and breaker bar. Seek to use the smallest extension possible that allows sufficient clearance from any obstructions whilst keeping the knuckle angle at less than 90 degrees. We would now like to look at spanners and wrenches. There are many different types of spanners, but the most popular type is a combination spanner, which has a ring end and an open end. As preference, you should always seek to use the ring end of the spanner as opposed to the open end. Similarly, you should always seek to use a spanner as preference over an adjustable wrench. As mentioned previously, never attempt to extend your spanner in any way or strike it with a hammer. If the bolt or fitting is tight or there is poor clearance, make use of a socket and extension bar. Next, we would like to take a look at the use of screwdrivers. First of all, it is important to point out that a screwdriver is meant for screwing and unscrewing. As such, it should not be used as a makeshift chisel or a makeshift pry bar. Secondly, as previously mentioned, you must ensure the screwdriver has the correct size and type of head, otherwise it could slip off or damage the screw. You must never screw towards your body, as there is a risk of slipping off and stabbing yourself. Instead, make use of a vise to secure the item and safely remove the screws. Now we will look at the use of hammers, punches and chisels. Hammers vary in terms of their shape, their size, their weight and the hardness of their head. It is very important that you choose the correct hammer in terms of the strength and power required. When choosing the hammer, you must also consider the material being struck and whether it is soft or fragile, or hard or brittle. Before using a hammer, you must ensure that the handle is free from any oil or residues which could cause the hammer to slip from your hand. For the same reason, if your gloves are contaminated with oil or grease, you should change them for fresh ones before using the hammer. Make sure you check the hammer head for signs of cracks or fractures, and always ensure that the handle and head are secure together. When using a hammer, take a firm grip between the middle and end of the shaft and ensure that you hit the object squarely. Holding the shaft near the head must be avoided. It increases the amount of effort required and also increases the likelihood of striking your knuckles. Also, you must never use the side of the hammer as the striking point. Finally, we will now look at saws, files and knives. Before using any hand tool designed for cutting, you must always ensure that the blade or cutting edge is sharp and in good condition. If you find the blade to be worn or damaged in any way, you must swap it for a new one before starting. When you are ready to start cutting, secure your workpiece into a vise with the line of cut at the side of the jaws. Once secured, draw the saw gently backwards or forwards a couple of times to create a groove in the material. Then, with a groove established, maintain a straight, controlled and regular sawing action. Never attempt to saw materials that you are holding in your hand or against your body, as this could result in an injury. Before using a file, you must always ensure that it is fitted with a handle. Using a file without a handle can result in serious injury. Do not attempt to file an object that you are holding in your hand. Instead, secure the material in a vise and use both hands to maintain a light, smooth and consistent motion. Finally, we will look at what is one of the most dangerous hand tools of them all, a knife. When using a knife, you must never cut towards yourself, as this could result in serious injury if the knife slips. Instead, you should use cut-resistant gloves and draw the knife away from your person. That concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening and please be safe.